All right, we are back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I will delve even deeper into some of the other developments in free agency that have taken place to this point. I'll cover the larger moves out there, and then I'll also get into some of the more minor deals and also going team by team to pick up where I left off on certain moves because, like I mentioned in the very first video, I did not cover every single thing that has taken place. So there's a good chance that by the end of this one could mostly catch up. Obviously, the Bonanza, while a lot of heavy heat is taking place at this point, it's not all over with. There are still other things that are going to develop over the course of time. But to get straight into it, we'll start out with news out of Cincinnati, where earlier in the month, you had both Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins get re-signed by the Bengals for mega contract extensions, to be completely honest with you. Ja'Marr Chase, obviously, being the Triple Crown winner last year and having one of the better starts that any wide receiver in NFL history can have to their career, you imagined that a contract extension of epic proportions was going to be allotted to him. And he would get a 4-year, $161 million contract extension, making him the highest paid wide receiver in the market currently, and also the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL from a general standpoint. Obviously, Myles Garrett had his 4-year, $160 million deal. So he just gets a little more than that. And it is well deserved, honestly. Quite literally one of the most surefire number one wide receivers the league has to have. And while you cannot, you could argue that he is the top receiver in football. It could be argued. Some people may not say that, and that's okay. And at the very least, he's a top 2, top 3 wide receiver and has been producing like one. 1,700 yards last season, led the league in touchdown receptions, and led the league in receptions. Like, you have to give credit where credit is due at this point. Especially with him on the verge, well, he just turned 25. All that production in a career season like that, prior to that, he hasn't even reached his peak yet. And yet he's already a 2-time All-Pro, getting first-team nods last season, 4 straight Pro Bowls to open up his career. Like, he's on the right path as a wide receiver in this league. Tee Higgins, as we've said with the Bengals for all this time, they have room for candidates that could be number one wide receivers on any other team in football. While Ja'Marr Chase gets a lot of the attention, and for good reason, Tee Higgins is a pretty great wide receiver in his own role. Even with him not getting as many looks, what you can't deny is that when he has been healthy, he's produced consistently. He's had at least 4 900-yard receiving seasons, including 911 yards last season, and a career high in touchdown catches with 10. He did miss 5 games in back-to-back seasons, and was previously franchise tagged in back-to-back off seasons, for what it's worth. So when that happened, I was confused. It's like, what is the game plan here? Like, do they not recognize that at some point they're going to have to pay him what he's worth. And to be honest, I did not think that they would push back on that so easily until we got news around the same time that Tee Higgins signed a 4-year, $115 million contract extension, making him a higher paid wide receiver than most number one wide receivers in the NFL right now. And also, I guess if you are going to classify him as a number 2 wide receiver, there aren't a lot of number 2 wide receivers getting paid what he's getting paid right now at around $28.75 million per year. And it is well deserved as a perfect complement to Ja'Marr Chase. And also, from that lens, you gotta respect it. They have, since they've been in the league, they've consistently not only produced as a unit, but on and off the field, there's something to be said about just how close they have gotten. So it would naturally be rough to have one or both of those guys just leave your franchise like this. And to be in the Bengals' position and secure both cannot be denied. You've got to be rooting for that, to be honest. So from a sentimental point of view, it's great. When you're looking at it for the future of the Bengals offense, it's great. For the most part. But from a team aspect, and from a salary cap aspect, the trio of Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and Tee Higgins, I think, account for somewhere near half of the Bengals' cap space. And everything else surrounding those three is generally up for question. Not at the wide receiver position, they're set. I mean, Andre Yoshivas as a number 3 has proven on occasion that he can contribute in his own way. That's not a problem. But they lost offensive linemen that were not necessarily good. I'm not going to act like they are. But I haven't heard necessarily recently even of them bringing in talent there. There are still heavy question marks, as there should be, when it comes to the defensive side of the football, legitimately everywhere. You still don't know what's going on with Trey Hendrickson, and honestly, given that you are allocating this much money elsewhere, and that Myles Garrett has reset the market for edge rushers and defensive ends, you could potentially lose out on him. Your cornerbacks are not consistent enough to warrant this sure feeling of their starting position. There shouldn't be certainty surrounding that. Jermaine Pratt, you lose him, and now you have to rebuild your overall front seven. And then on the back end, I mean, ever since you lost Jesse Bates, you've been trying to figure out who the hell is going to play safety for you at this point. They made the move last year to get Geno Stone, and honestly, I can't imagine that they liked making that move. So you might be moving on from him too. Where's the contingency plan for him? We have no idea. So even though you shore up your passing game, everything else about you is somewhat weak. You're bringing back some of the same guys who led pretty much one of the worst defenses in football last season. And you're also not necessarily shoring up an offensive line unit that has also consistently not been elite. At least when while Joe Burrow has been there, they haven't been elite. You can kind of make the argument, like even with them getting Orlando Brown Jr., dude, honestly, last notable offensive lineman for the Bengals that stands out to me is Andrew Whitworth. Do you know how long ago that was? Specifically for the Bengals. We're talking about 9 years now of just a rotating cast of random tackles and guards that don't really get the job done. Remember, the Bengals also had Billy Price for a time, and that didn't pan out. They have got some stuff to figure out, man. It's like, that's just horrible. To continue to put your quarterback through that. But I mean, given that Joe Burrow lobbied for his guys, which granted, again, it's fair. It does help Joe Burrow that he gets to keep two of the top wide receiver targets out there, generally speaking. This is what he signed up. It's what he signed up for. He knows what he's getting himself into. But the team has at least got to counter it in some fashion. Derek Stingley Jr. of the Texans would also sign a 3-year, $90 million contract extension that would make him the highest paid defensive back, or highest paid cornerback in the NFL right now, breaking the record that J.C. Horn literally just set this offseason. But this is also a contract that I feel is well deserved. He has been pretty damn good, to say the least. Now, obviously, his first 2 seasons were hampered by injury, though in 11 games in 2023, you did see him nab 5 interceptions and also 13 pass deflections in just 11 games. I guess the question then was, could he sustain that level of play for an entire season? Obviously, with where they drafted him in the first round and 3rd overall pick in 2022, you were banking on him taking that next step pretty early in his NFL career, and that in 2024 he certainly did, nabbing his first Pro Bowl and All-Pro first team selection, while getting 5 interceptions as well, along with 18 pass deflections and 54 overall tackles, 4 tackles per loss as a cornerback. Like, those are pretty gaudy numbers. He's only 23 years old at this point. He will be 24 at the start of next season. And it seems like he will only be on the rise from there, which is certainly a good thing for a Texans franchise that, while they have consistently been a franchise that has been down in the dumps, these past few draft classes have certainly turned things around for them in more ways than one. And you were just hoping that they can compound on that in time. Seems, though, that given how this next deal reads, it could get a little interesting first. Because Danielle Hunter had been a huge acquisition for them last offseason. And in 2024, he did put up 12 sacks, 46 tackles, 23 quarterback hits, and 17 TFLs, along with 3 pass deflections, getting himself a Pro Bowl nod as one of the better edge rushers in the NFL. that he consistently has been for at least the past, I guess, 6 years or so going on now. And I guess he was in a contract year. He did relatively well for them. So the Texans decided to give him a 1-year contract worth up to $35.6 million. Granted, it's deserved, but it's a little bit of an unorthodox move in my opinion. You know that he's going to produce for you. There's no question about that in my mind. It's just like, damn, you don't want to spread that money out? You just want to spend all of that in one fell swoop? It's fair game. It's just kind of shocking to me. I'm not going to lie to you. For this next development, there are actually proposals in place for the NFL's annual league meeting in just a few short days from now at the end of March. They had put out an entire list of them in advance, and they won't be voted on until the meeting. But a lot happened. So I can just go here. So, okay. There are a few for the changing rules in terms of plays. There are rules in place or proposals here for general roster movements and also playoff structure. And there are also just a few miscellaneous ones. So there are 3 for rule proposals for each club, and we'll get into that to start out. So 1 from Detroit amends Rule 8 in Section 4 of the handbook to eliminate an automatic first down as a penalty imposed for defensive holding and illegal contact. So all of the 15-yard penalties and automatic first downs, if this rule or if this proposal were to pass, depending on how many organizations vote on it, there would no longer be an enforcement of a penalty of sorts for defensive holding and illegal contact. So anything within 5 yards in terms of jamming receivers would be reverted to have legality once more. And illegal contact, you can define that in many different ways. I guess as long as the contact is not egregious, like some fucking cheap shot or a hip drop tackle, then you're probably fine. Honestly, though, I can see it passing. I just get the feeling that it won't. I mean, it's definitely gut-wrenching when you have players on the defensive side of the ball make such great plays on the football in different contexts, or in terms of trying to stop their man from picking up a first down or reeling in a catch. See it all the time where you think that they are pretty much in the clear, that they've done everything by the book, and yet some random penalty out of nowhere ruins that momentum, gives the opposing team a first down, and then extends the drive into something that ultimately screws them over in the long run. Given that, I think that some teams would be willing to allow this one to pass. But we will have to see about that. Now the next one, and this one is probably the most infamous. It got a lot of press. So this proposal by Green Bay would amend Rule 12, Section 1 of the NFL rulebook. Don't know why I said handbook in the first place. But it states that an offensive player would be prohibited from pushing a teammate who was lined up directly behind the snapper and receives the snap immediately at the snap. As you can imagine, there is only one play in the league right now that has this specific kind of sequence of actions going on. For the second straight year, you have a team trying to outlaw the tush push. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. Before this came out, I did think personally that the Commanders were the team who had put out this proposal because it was rumored to be the Packers, but I wasn't really. I was not buying that initially. And then, now that it's official, we have clear evidence that it's them. It's just like, how weak can you be? How weak can you be? It is as simple as that to me. Like, yes, you did face the wrath of that multiple times last season to open up your season in Brazil and lose by 5 to the Eagles in Sao Paulo, and then on a Sunday lose to the Eagles by 12 in Philly. Do the Packers not necessarily understand why they lost both of those games? It didn't have anything to do with the tush push, even though it had been damn effective against them. But in both of those games, I kid you not, turnovers got in their way on both occasions. Turnovers had nothing to do with this quote-unquote illegal tactic used by the Eagles to further their prospects of winning the damn ball game. You shot yourselves in the foot numerous times. Like in that first matchup, you had chances to respond to what the Eagles were doing. But your defense, yes, it was the first game of the season, they did not have their heads on straight. And the Eagles were able to just get whatever they wanted. Saquon Barkley, honestly, like, he had an all-around game, but we weren't even dealing with the Saquon Barkley that was rushing for fucking 200 yards and shit yet. We didn't even have that yet. It was a standard game for any running back. Jalen Hurts did fine, and he outplayed Jordan Love when it mattered the most. Same thing goes for the wild card game. Same exact thing. Like, oh boy. Like, I don't know why they think that this would be the case. Jordan Love literally had a complete and total meltdown in the first half of that ball game. And then the war of attrition got to some players in the second half, like a Romeo Doubs, that made it hard for Green Bay to make a push at all. None of that has to do with the tush push. But because you want to cry and complain about sure not being able to stop it, it is not unstoppable. It is damn difficult if you don't have the personnel or the discipline like the Commanders lacked in that crazy-ass sequence that still all these weeks later I'm not over. But, like, there's just no reason they should consistently be doing this, in my opinion. Like, it's not called for. you're just going to try to get their own unique play out of here because you can't stop it. Just get better at stopping it. Other teams certainly have by this point. It's not an impossible play to guard, but there are certain things that you have to do on your end to affect that outcome. And if you're not, and if they get the same result every time, well, you can't complain because you're not doing your job. That's not how this thing works. All right, now this next one by the Eagles would amend Rule 16 and Section 1 of the NFL Handbook to align the postseason and regular season overtime rules by granting both teams an opportunity to possess the ball regardless of the outcome of the first possession, subject to a 15-minute overtime period in the regular season. I don't know how to feel about this one personally. I did hear a bit about it on a few sports shows and things like that. And I heard other people discuss and talk about it. On the one hand, I get it. More football. More chances for exposure, coverage, advertisements. More. From that lens. I do get why you would have this be extended. Rather than just have a team go down for one possession and potentially end the game with a quick touchdown. Naturally, the league is getting more and more talented overall by the year as some of the weeds get cropped out and things like that. So you want to see these players on the biggest stage in the biggest moments. I do get it. On the other hand, with that exact statement, more football, more potential for injuries, more potential for wear and tear. At least depending on the players involved that you're dealing with on a specific team. I'm not going to necessarily say that there is legitimate proof that any overtime period ever would lead to any debilitating injury of any kind. But there is always a risk factor there when you're talking about playing any game for that much time on end. Also, in terms of being against it, there's something that gets lost in terms of tradition if you add that aspect of overtime to the regular season, in my opinion. To be honest. I'm not going to lie. I believe the same thing when they made the change for the overtime period in the postseason to have both teams get at least a shot of possessing the football. It takes away from the suspense, I think, personally. It does, yes. Josh Allen cried his way to get that passed. I get that. But why would you want, in a normal situation, why would you want to give your opponent any chance? Especially if you get the ball and you score. As it had been before, games should be up and over by then. Literally. Like, it's not the winning team's fault that the loser, with extra time, did not do their job in regulation and did not do their job on defense to just naturally ensure themselves another possession in overtime. Why are we giving one over like they're owed that? No. It's playoff football. Tradition is to literally fight until the very end to usurp your opponent and then be at the top of the league by the time it's all said and done. And honestly, when that rule passed, I felt that this was just kind of like a participatory thing. Like, I mean, you're here and we don't necessarily want you to go so early on if you get to extra time, so we're just going to give you an extra possession to make something happen. It's not like that's just artificial to me. If you are putting it all on the line, as an entire squad, you are literally giving it your all until the very end. That means that in games past that had the standard and more traditional overtime, you saw players go full throttle, trying their best to stop their opponent from getting the upper hand on them. And likewise, offenses are going to pull out all the stops and make sure that they have enough left in the tank to beat their opponent in this elaborate chess match. That's how I see overtime as. It's a chess match. It's the ultimate way to gauge, really, who really has the better skills in high stakes moments. You can look at it from a coaching aspect. You can look at it from player talent. You really get to see the nails and bolts, the nuts and bolts of that in a traditional overtime setting. Yes, obviously that's extended if you add an additional period and tack it on at the end. But I don't know if I really am a fan of it to this point still. And now you have a team in the Eagles contemplating that in the regular season. Like, if it is what it is at this point, and nobody's necessarily challenging that specific proposal from a few years back, maybe it just is what it is. And I just have to come to accept it in some way. But at the same time, if you are going to have it in place, that belongs in the postseason. It should be sacred to the postseason. Because in that metric, with so much stakes on the line already, even if you're not necessarily as good of a football team as your opponent, you did work your way here from the regular season into the postseason, into a potentially competitive ball game. Maybe you had to battle back from a lead. Maybe you've been going toe-to-toe with this opponent. Maybe you are owed that chance then. In the regular season, you are still trying to prove yourself. Generally speaking, as a football team, some teams are just that damn good to where they don't need to be proven and tested like that. There are other teams who will go on such bad stretches in an NFL season and then turn it up. There are those who will start off hot. We've seen it all the time. And then cool off at the tail end of the season. Sometimes missing the playoffs. And sometimes barely getting in. All in all, you haven't done anything as far as this goes yet. Why give them that additional chance? Or at least give them the option of having that additional chance so early on? It is not something that should just be handed out like a trophy or something. You have to get yourself to that point. And that means doing everything you can in the regular season and in regulation. And also organically in overtime. Work your way up to being one of the best teams in football. Or being one of the last teams standing prior to a potential playoff run. And then you can be given your chance to have a guaranteed possession. Too much goes on in the regular season to where you can have that happen. I'm not gonna. Too much happens, generally. So much can happen during a game with one specific player or one specific team to where you want to leave any of that up to chance right now. We saw multiple contenders last season lose out on it because of how many injuries they racked up over time. Obviously, when you look at a guy like Chris Godwin, you're having them, the Bucs, trying to come back in that ball game, and he gets his ACL torn late in the ball game. As they trying to make a push for tying the game up in a game that was seemingly done. Also, when it comes to how they schedule these games, not every game is in need of extra time. Not every game. Especially some of the games that have been broadcast over the past few seasons with some of these trash-ass teams in the league. The last thing you need, if you are the NFL, is to keep around a specific audience that genuinely isn't interested. Why would you want to self-sabotage and provide a guaranteed possession in a game between last season's Giants and last season's Patriots, for example? Why the hell would you want to do... Who would watch that after a while? Who? At multiple points last season, those offenses were anemic as shit. if you were to have a game like that be played, you could just have that happen organically. Both teams would get opportunity on opportunity to make something happen because their defenses were relatively stout and their offenses were not moving the football around. That's just a hypothetical game, but honestly, that is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Just let it happen. Let the game unfold on its own terms, on its own accord. That is what brings that element of suspense, drama, chaos to the NFL in these specific events. You're taking that away when you guarantee that a team is getting a possession. When instead, all you gotta do is allow them to go toe-to-toe with scheming up different plays to stop an opponent, scheming up different plays to get the better of an opponent on any given down. Let the players show what they're really made of in overtime naturally. You can't force that. You can't force something like that. That's my point about this one. Moving on to the bylaw proposals for it. So Detroit would have another pair of proposals. First, they would this one would amend Article 20 in Section 20.2 of the Constitution and bylaws in the rulebook to amend the current playoff seeding format to allow wildcard teams to be seeded higher than division champions if the wildcard team has a better regular season record. It's pretty bold to me that Detroit winning the 1 seed last season would really need this rule to be passed. But from what I did initially see about it, it would have certainly shook up a lot for the NFC side. Pretty much every single wildcard game would be played elsewhere. And not to mention that every single wildcard game could potentially, under certain circumstances, have a different winner to where maybe the Lions don't run into the Commanders. But that could still, you just never really know. Still, the playoff structure is something that has been consistently changing for the NFL over the years. They don't ever seem to figure it out. This is just another rule of which, I guess you have different organizations trying to take some sort of next step. But I'm just really not sure that this one would pass either. Can you get the entire league behind this? Can you get a majority behind this? Not every team would be for it. I have a hard time believing that. Detroit would have another one from Article 17 and Section 17.1 of the Constitution and bylaws to exclude from the 90-player limit a player placed on reserved or injured before or on the day of the roster reduction to 53 players unless such player is designated for return. I think that this one could certainly help a fair amount of teams, especially with players who are significant to the pretty much overall culture, standing of the team that they play for. And I mean, specifically for the Lions, I guess that yeah. You know what? Might have the wrong read on this one, actually. Actually, no. Yeah, I think I'm set on this one. Could definitely help some teams. Like for Detroit, I believe that a guy like Aiden Hutchinson would be a player who is still going to be on the reserve or injured list prior to the day of this roster reduction. I would believe that. Obviously, we've seen Aiden Hutchinson make progress. Since then, he still wasn't able to return. But I guess that for this to pass, it would exclude him and keep him a part of that roster, even with the typical 53-man roster being set. He would still be there, just not necessarily a part of the squad on opening day. Depending on the timeline for Aiden Hutchinson and how long it actually takes him to get back up to full game speed, this could be the case under this rule if it were to pass. He would be a player that would be excluded until he gets designated for return under the IR rules and things like that. And then they would probably have to release some individual off of their roster. Probably a player who is temporarily replacing Aiden Hutchinson at this point. But yeah, okay, I think I actually get it now. This one, if they can do a decent job of convincing each and every owner, I think that this one does have a likely chance of getting passed as a proposal. I do think that. You know, I can see where they're coming from with it, looking at it a little deeper now. Alright, for club resolution proposals, there is one by Pittsburgh where clubs are permitted during the 2-day negotiation period to have one video or phone call with a prospective unrestricted free agent and his player agent, and permits a club to arrange for the players' travel upon agreeing to terms with a new prospective unrestricted free agent, and travel cannot occur until the beginning of the new league year. We all know why Pittsburgh wants to pass this one. We all know why they want to have this one passed. Let me rephrase that. They literally do not have a quarterback in place right now, and you can literally cite these couple of things that they have here as criterion for this permitted activity during the 2-day negotiation period as the reasons why Justin Fields was scooped up from Pittsburgh. Because this did, in fact, have travel occur prior to the start of the new league year. The Jets did get in contact with Justin Fields and his agent. And they did arrange for his travel. If this were to pass, if this rule were in effect at the time, they wouldn't have lost Justin Fields. And multiple clubs were in contact with Russell Wilson too. I won't spoil that, but yeah. You can understand why this is the case. You know, this next one has several clubs' involvement. You have the Ravens, the Browns, the Texans, the Raiders, the Vikings, the Eagles, and the Commanders planning to have a rule pass which permits clubs to prepare kicking footballs before game day, similar to the process permitted for game footballs. Very miscellaneous, but honestly, I guess if you have multiple teams already joining in the creation of this, potentially, this one will probably get passed as well. It just seems like a tedious process to have these kicking footballs be prepared along with game footballs. I'm pretty sure there's a group of almost, I want to say, it's definitely a good amount of footballs that get carried around for in-game use anyways. And that this is literally just for insurance. You're not seeing them run through an entire group of fucking game balls, even though those are prepared over time for obvious reasons. They just have them there in case. What is stopping a group of two teams from just taking one of the extra game balls and using that as a kicking football? That's what I'm getting from this. You don't need to have a separate group of fucking footballs just for kicking. Take some of the extra ones that you have for fucking in-game use and use those for your little kicking footballs. It's not a big deal. You don't need to have that separation of that. They carry around a good number. At most, you just need one kicking football for each team. What are you scared of? You're going to lose the kicking football as your kicker is fucking practicing extra points and kickoffs? You're going to have the kicking football, you're going to have the ball deflate prior to the game. What? No. Just, it's fine. You don't have to do it. So I can see this passing. It's really just, if you have to prepare kicking footballs, are we being fucking serious? It is literally not that hard, as I just said, to just take an extra football out of the batch that they have consistently. Matter of fact, let me see this right now, because there's definitely a number on how much they carry. So let me check this out, bro. The NFL rules state that each NFL team must bring 12 footballs that they will use on offense. In addition to the 12 footballs, the home team must provide 12 backup footballs, and the visiting teams have the option to bring their own 12 footballs to use as backups on the offense. So we're talking about anywhere between 36 and 48 footballs being prepared per football game across around 270 plus games of football. And we're just talking about the regular season. Like, at that point, you don't need the extra preparation of having a full set of kicking footballs. Like, yes, a lot does go into it, and anything can happen during the game to where a ball might get damaged or messed up. That's fair. But where's the harm if you have a pool of 24 max? You can't take one out of that and just use it for your kicker to practice before the game. And even, like, you'll have it happen during the game on the sidelines, but not prior to the game. Like, yeah, no, this one will pass. Because, yeah, that's just, not only is it just tedious, we're literally doing it for conservation. You don't need all that. 36 to 48 is a good enough amount. Why even bother having any more? Because if you need any more, that means that it's just going to be a longer process for the people who make the damn footballs in the first place. Some people don't have time for that shit. This one will pass. And then from Washington, this proposal will permit clubs that may qualify for the postseason to obtain scouting credentials for 2 consecutive games played by a potential postseason opponent, and it would require that clubs hosting wildcard games provide scouting credentials to all teams within the same conference who are participating in the postseason. I mean, yeah, I kind of see where this one is coming from. Like, you should not... Yeah, scouting credentials, I would assume that means that you have some lower level personnel from these opponents or so showing up at ball games and scouting these teams. Yeah, that's just fishy in and of itself, and we've seen that play out on the college football side, and we've seen what's happened there. You don't need those problems in the NFL again. You don't. Just let the games play out. You can watch film organically from the safety of your own organization. You do not need to have this happen. And then, I guess, this second half of this one, Well, you know what? Yeah, okay. I guess it kind of just does it on its own. I mean, realistically, if anything, you could have a single game be like, yeah, back to back would be suspicious, but honestly, really, that second half does create a little bit of a loophole. You just have one. Just obtain the scouting credentials for a single game. And then go from there. Because if you need clubs who are hosting the wild card games to do so, you're only going to be in one place at one time. I mean, all teams within the same conference might be... Yeah, all teams within the same conference who are participating in the postseason could be tricky. And again, this also goes back into just figuring out how the hell you are going to restructure the playoffs. Because, again, yeah, participants of the postseason will get access to it, but we have seen multiple seasons in a row, honestly, where the playoffs aren't even truly decided until the very end of the season, with tiebreakers and different playoff clinching and losing situations even. We've seen that play out multiple seasons in a row. So there's no way for you to really tell prior to doing this if you can only make it happen for one, even with that one being the final week of the season. The playoff field isn't even still set at that point in some instances. So how are you going to be able to make that work? So honestly, this one, it won't pass. My prediction. I do believe that they will make revisions on this in time. This probably will not be the last we'll see of this specific rule right here. But they're going to be asked to go back to the drawing board because it's just like they've got to get a lot of other shit together before enforcing this. Because it's just too arbitrary right now. Like, there, again, if you have some of these races to the playoffs being this contested, down to where it is literally coming down to the wire, the final game of the season. And I guess if you're a top seed, fine. But let's say you are the 7th seed. Like, at that point, you really, like, all teams would not be able to do it. Because you don't know how things will shape up. And then, in its nature, it's arbitrary too. I mean, how long is the process going to take for a team to acquire said scouting credentials? How long is that going to take? Because it would probably have to happen after the end of the season, and that's the specific situation. How long is the process? We don't even know. I don't know. We'll see about it, though. But yeah, that was definitely something. So, getting into a couple of other major moves that involve a wide variety of things, okay? So you have Aaron Rodgers coming out and at least alluding to the fact that he has expressed some interest in the Steelers. In the days following that, we've had Cameron Hayward kind of take some apparent jabs at Aaron Rodgers. He did walk back his comments and say that he would love to have him, of course. But granted, knowing what we know now, they might need him because, let's be honest, the Steelers do not currently have a quarterback right now, and you'll understand why in a bit. Their only notable guy on the roster right now is Mason Rudolph, who they re-signed for a 2-year deal, I believe. And I can tell you right now, he is not going to be the answer for them. So if you're thinking that this is going to be a repeat of those few ball games in 2019, you are absolutely wrong. That is not going to be the case here. The Giants, on the other hand, are certainly trying to do something. The thing is, I do not know what. I mean, I'm so confused with the sequence of events that they've had going over the past few days. I can't wrap my head around it. So they go out and they sign Jameis Winston to a 2-year, $8 million deal. And initially, I was thinking that, hey, it was a solid move for a potential bridge quarterback in Jameis Winston at this point. I would think that with a quarterback like Jameis Winston, Malik Nabers would honestly thrive. I mean, he did last season. We're talking about him dealing with a combo of Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, and Daniel Jones. He did great in his rookie year and got a nod as a Pro Bowler. So to have that happen and then bring in a guy like Jameis, who you know is going to go balls to the wall and just throw the ball any and everywhere, he's going to produce well, I believe, in this system. And honestly, with a quarterback like Jameis Winston at the helm, you can't necessarily ensure that you're going to win every game with a man who has gone in his career as a starter 36-51. But what you can get from Jameis Winston is complete and total synchronization in the locker room. Total synchronous sentiment in the locker room. Everyone is going to be on the same page. Even if you're not necessarily like crazy or a player of crazy standing in the Giants locker room, Jameis Winston will certainly get you there. He's going to be willing to chop it up with you. And they are going to be exceptionally lit in there. You can't deny it. Man is a great, he can lead you. He will lead you. It might not be in the most conventional way imaginable, but he knows how to rally his teammates. And with a franchise like the Giants that has been this dysfunctional for this long, you need a player that can do that for you. So I thought that it was a solid move, but then the Giants decided to do something that just completely disheartened me. And they would sign none other than Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal worth up to $21 million with $10.5 guaranteed. And then that changed it completely. For one, obviously, I just man, it is going to be so weird to see Russell Wilson in a Giants jersey. But in the same way, it also just generally confuses me from a draft standpoint. What the hell are they going to do in the draft? Now, because at least with Jameis Winston on the roster and I guess Tommy DeVito still being there, there was probably a better chance that you would draft the quarterback early in the first round of the draft. Now that Russell Wilson is there too, along with Tommy DeVito, I don't know how likely it is for them to draft a quarterback right now. And it's really hard for me to imagine where this thing goes. Like, are you trying to ride it out with those two? Are you trying to get a quarterback in this draft or maybe wait a couple years down the line? There are just a lot of mixed signals, and I don't really know what to make of them when it comes to this team. What I can say is that even an old Russell Wilson will probably offer you more stability at the quarterback position than Daniel Jones did. But the Giants still have a litany of issues elsewhere that could potentially affect them. Their O-line is also one of the worst units in the NFL, outside of Andrew Thomas. One of the worst. The rushing attack could be better. And with a quarterback like Russell Wilson, who is a killer in terms of improvisation, in terms of the deep ball, and in terms of play action, the run game we saw with the Steelers last season and with the Broncos struggles of being able to produce in those aspects when the rushing attack was not effective or even just a capable threat for teams to at least hone in on and open up those opportunities down the field or in the intermediate area. You know, it's not really going to go all that smoothly. Like, I guess it's a fine move, but it really does confuse me. This one, for the Patriots, though, does not. They still got a lot of money to spend, and they are making the most of it because yesterday, they would sign Stefon Diggs to a 3-year, $69 million deal with $26 million guaranteed. Low risk and high reward. I thought initially that $23 million a year for a player in Stefon Diggs was just coming off a torn ACL was a little wild, but then $26 million guaranteed honestly makes this a steal, if we can really call it that. It's a steal. Especially with what Stefon Diggs can provide for an offense. Because I absolutely love this move. It is something that provides the Patriots chance for massive upside. I mean, we're talking about a guy who had 4 straight Pro Bowl appearances. Obviously, in Houston, with a stacked wide receiver core, can argue he did not necessarily have a great year for his standards. It would have been a total on par with his 2016 season, but it still wouldn't have been anywhere near what he was doing later in his Minnesota tenure and with Buffalo. That's just it. In the right system, with a motivated Stefon Diggs, you're going to see him absolutely produce and play his ass off. As he'll tell you, he's a dog. And then not to mention, too, when you look into how this could work for the Patriots, you saw Kirk Cousins elevate into one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, with Stefon Diggs' and Adam Thielen's combined production here in Minnesota because of what he was doing there. In 2020, Josh Allen turned a corner in his career because, boy, prior to him getting Stefon Diggs and also having Joe Brady come over and things like that, he was atrocious as an NFL quarterback. I mean, he was not, like, the raw talent summed up his game perfectly. He had the physical ability, but oh boy, he could not string anything together. And then Stefon Diggs gets there, and he quite literally accelerates his development, giving Josh Allen a number one wide receiver to throw to, and also just unlocking something within Josh Allen that would eventually turn him into one of the best quarterbacks in the league over the past few seasons, since 2020. And ultimately getting him the bag that he just got. Or leading to that, at least. Because now, at least, Kirk Cousins is a different story. But without Stefon Diggs, at least the experience of having him ultimately allow Josh Allen to kind of evolve as a quarterback. And then, when Stefon Diggs was gone, by that point, in having that experience with a number one caliber wide receiver, he was essentially able to learn how to navigate without one on his own accord. Because by getting those tendencies to work with Stefon Diggs, he then found that he could make it happen with just about anyone. Now, in 2025, he's going to be paired up with another young and somewhat project quarterback in Drake May. He could potentially accelerate his development and get him accustomed to what number one wide receiver production looks like. Stefon Diggs is obviously going to eat there. He had been a Patriots killer for so long. So we get that he will certainly perform. It is just a matter of health. Drake May might be different from Josh Allen. Only time will tell, because honestly, you don't know how he would be potentially after having a season or a few with Stefon Diggs. We don't know if he could coexist and produce on a great level without him after that. We don't know. Josh Allen might just be unique in that regard. But it gives the Patriots yet another weapon for Drake May to throw the ball to and someone to learn from, ultimately. And that does go a long way for a quarterback like him. So those are the ones that I would go in depth on. But I will now move into at least some of the other moves here and then try to go team by team. So, over the course of this time, the Raiders would sign Raheem Mostert. Alexander Mattison did leave for the Dolphins, as I checked yesterday. But the Raiders still need a run game. I don't, Raheem Mostert is so temporary, and also, call it what it is, he is a little fragile. He is only getting up there in age. I don't know how the Raiders see this as a fix. They may need to get someone else from the draft to pair up alongside him. The Chiefs would sign Gardner Minshew II as a backup quarterback. The Cowboys would sign Miles Sanders as a running back 2, I guess, alongside Javonte Williams. Same thing. They may not necessarily draft a running back, although they should. But I don't know how Miles Sanders solves their problem. So, at that point, you were better off keeping Rico Dowdle if you were the Cowboys. I'm not going to act like this is going to be consistent for Rico Dowdle, the production that he had last season. But what I am saying is that you move from a guy in Rico Dowdle who did provide that for you last season, and instead pick up a guy in Javonte Williams primarily, who is a below average runner of the football in terms of yards per carry. He's not efficient. And then a guy in Miles Sanders who went an entire NFL season without scoring a touchdown before. If I did not... Oh my goodness, man. Oh my gosh. He went an entire NFL season without scoring a touchdown. As the running back 1 in Philadelphia in 2021. And then last season, pretty much ever since he's been with the Panthers, his usage has decreased. And his efficiency has also gone to shit. Now, granted, Carolina's offensive line isn't necessarily anything to write home about, but they're not that bad to where a guy in Miles Sanders averages 3.5 yards per carry with them and combines for just 637 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in 27 ball games as a running back 2 for them. Chuba Hubbard was certainly struggling in some games, and even he ended up having a career year last season as the 1. They brought over Miles Sanders to have that role, not for Chuba Hubbard to completely blow him out of the water. I guess on a short-term deal, you don't have anything to lose. But, man, if you're literally running you're running in circles. This is exactly where the Cowboys were at just a few seasons ago. Where you have the talent in the passing game, and your passing offense is one of the top in the league, but your rushing offense is so subpar that you are barely able to get by with that. Because you are a first round exit as soon as you get matched up against a team who is capable of putting your passing offense in a box. The second that happens, the Cowboys of this season are screwed unless they figure something out there. Because that's just not good. The 49ers would trade Jordan Mason to Minnesota. The Ravens would sign Cooper Rush away from the Cowboys to a 2-year, $12.2 million deal. You don't have Cooper Rush anymore. Fine. What's happening with Trey Lance? What's happening with him? Haven't heard a damn thing about what is going on with that man. What is happening? I literally don't know right now. They have got to figure this out. It is getting bad, man. The Vikings would release center Garrett Bradbury. The Eagles would sign away the Giants' Azeez Ojulari to a 1-year deal. The Eagles would also re-sign Lane Johnson to a one-year extension with at least $30 million in guarantees, which is well-deserved. He's been one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, regardless of position, for the last decade. So I get that. Eagles' Brandon Graham would retire after 15 seasons. He had played through a tear of some ligament in his body in the Super Bowl. And honestly, with his body wearing down like that, even if the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl, as I stated before, he probably wasn't going to spend more time playing. Like, those are just clear signs that your body is telling you that you just cannot go on for much longer in this profession. You gotta listen to it. You got to. You want to be around for those relatives of yours, being as active as you can for them and participating, being a presence for them instead of being to the wayside like that. If you were just in a position where you're in horrible condition, you don't want that for yourself. So Brandon Graham is making the right move, and at the very least, he does go out on top as a two-time Super Bowl champion with the franchise that he called home for all these years. You can't write a better ending than that, minus the injuries, of course. Jeff Okudah would sign a one-year deal with the Vikings. Mecole Hardman Jr. would sign a one-year deal with the Packers. The Falcons would sign Jordan Fuller away from the Rams. Well, no, he was with the Panthers last season, actually. No. The Texans would sign Cam Robinson to a one-year deal to replace Laramie Tunsil. Downgrade, for sure. I don't know. Bears would sign return specialist Devin Duvernay to a one-year deal. The Vikings would sign away Rondale Moore from the Falcons. He didn't appear because he was hurt, but I honestly think that as a slot guy, he could provide a little more for them than KJ Osborne was during his tenure there. So I like that move. The University of California would hire former Panthers and Commanders head coach Ron Rivera as the head coach of that program. He is an alum of the school and did play there in the 1980s, I believe. So, homecoming for him. Makes sense. Jamal Agnew, return specialist, would also sign with the Falcons. The Lions would sign cornerback Rocky Ya-Sin. The Browns would sign offensive tackle Teven Jenkins. That is stinky. What does that mean for Jedrick Wills Jr.? We will see. The Commanders signed away Michael Gallup as he would re-enter the league after being retired and away from football last season. The Dolphins would sign linebacker Willie Gay Jr. The Giants would sign wide receiver Lil'Jordan Humphrey. The Lions would also go out and sign cornerback Avonte Maddox away from the Eagles. Which honestly, as I do actually like that. It makes sense. Now, I don't think he's going to be your cornerback one, but as a complementary piece to a guy like DJ Reed Jr., even a slot guy, I think that it is a good move. You've just got to figure out schemes. Because honestly, with how they look too, not going to lie, Brian Branch is so versatile that you may also want to play him at cornerback, and they have. But I'd stick with that. Brandin Cooks would have a homecoming of his own as he would return to the Saints on a short-term deal. The Browns would sign former Ohio State edge rusher and linebacker Jerome Baker. Homecoming for him, but they have a rotating cast of just subpar linebackers. Hopefully Jerome Baker can rise above that in this role. The Giants would also sign Zach Pascal and Aaron Stinney. Yeah, Aaron Stinney as an offensive lineman is not very good. That's your help for either Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson, or if they do still decide to draft a quarterback, that's your guy? Okay. The Titans would sign Joey Slye away from the Commanders. The Eagles would sign Kendall Lamm. And yeah. For the general moves here, that does do it. Oh no, yeah, Joey Slye did play with the Pats last year. I'm kind of okay. Right. But yeah, that does it for that. Now I'm going to move into team by team and just run through some that I may not have covered to this point. So to start out, this is division by division as I have it pulled up on the NFL website. So we're in the AFC East. Jeez. Starting out with the Bills here, and they re-signed Ty Johnson to a 2-year, $5 million deal. They re-signed Reggie Gilliam to a 1-year, $2 million deal, their fullback. They also signed Darrington Evans to a 1-year, $1.21 million deal with just $15,000 guaranteed. Oh my God. That is kind of a violation, bro. $15,000 guaranteed. You couldn't even hook him up with 6 digits. That's kind of foul. I'm not going to lie. Offensive guard Kendrick Green would sign a 1-year deal. They signed away Michael Hoyt from the Rams, the outside linebacker, to a 3-year contract worth up to $24 million. They signed Dane Jackson to a 1-year deal. They signed Derek Forrest to a 1-year deal. And they also re-signed their long snapper to a 4-year contract. The Dolphins, during this time, yes, I mentioned they signed Alexander Madison to a 1-year deal. They re-signed Dwayne Eskridge. They signed Pharaoh Brown away from the Seahawks. I didn't know that. They signed Jackson Carman from the Bengals. Offensive tackle, they signed away offensive lineman Larry Barham from the Bears. Just a standard free agent deal. They signed James Daniels to a 3-year, $24 million deal. They re-signed Liam Eichenberg. They re-signed their defensive tackle Benito Jones. They re-signed their linebacker KJ Britt to a 1-year deal. They signed Artie Burns away from the Seahawks to a 1-year deal as well. They re-signed Elijah Campbell to the squad. They also signed away Ashton Davis from the Jets to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal with a max value of $3 million with incentives. As a depth piece, Ashton Davis isn't actually a bad get. And then Ryan Stonehouse of the Titans would sign with Dolphins as well, the punter. The Patriots would continue to get active elsewhere. They signed Josh Dobbs to a 2-year, $8 million deal, with $3.8 million guaranteed as a backup to Drake May, which honestly, given what he had done with the past couple of seasons as a backup, not bad. They would re-sign Austin Hooper on a 1-year, $5 million deal with $4 million guaranteed and with probably incentives, a max value of $7 million. They would sign offensive guard Wes Schweitzer away from the Commanders. They would sign Garrett Bradbury away from the Vikings in free agency. They would sign K'Lavon Chaisson to a 1-year, $5 million deal. They would sign Kiris Tonga to a 1-year, $2.7 million deal. They would sign Marcus Epps to a 1-year, $4.4 million deal. And they would sign Jalen Hawkins re-sign Jalen Hawkins to a contract. The Jets along with their other moves, would re-sign Kene Nwangwu to a one-year, $2.5 million deal, the return specialists. They would sign Tyler Johnson, the wide receiver, to the Jets. And honestly, we haven't heard anything about Allen Lazard to this point. But if he does actually get moved, like they gave him permission to do, then I think that this makes sense. I feel like they would want to give more reps to Malachi Corley as well. You never know. The Jets would also sign Chukwuma Okorafor. They would sign Josh Myers to a one-year deal. They would sign Byron Cowart and Derek Nnadi, both D linemen, to the Jets on standard deals. The Chiefs losing Derek Nnadi is kind of crazy. They would also sign defensive lineman Jay Tufele. They signed re-signed Jamin Davis. And they re-signed Isaiah Oliver as well. Now, on to the AFC North with the Ravens here. They re-signed Patrick Ricard to a one-year, $2.87 million deal. They also re-signed Ben Cleveland. And they actually picked up Chidobe Awuzie, signed him to a one-year deal. It's been a long time since Chidobe Awuzie has been a truly capable cornerback in the league, but I'm not going to lie, as a complementary piece, as a rotational piece even, with the likes of Marlon Humphrey and even Nate Wiggins now asserting themselves to replace Brandon Stephens and get someone respectable in that role, I applaud that. I have no problems with that at all. Anyone would be an upgrade over. Anyone would be an upgrade over Brandon Stephens. Personally. The Bengals would get back Samaje Perine on a 2-year deal worth up to $3.8 million. They would re-sign Mike Gesicki on a 3-year deal worth $25.5 million. $12 million of that will be allocated in the first year. They would re-sign Tanner Hudson, backup tight end. They would sign Lucas Patrick, offensive guard. They would re-sign Cody Ford, the offensive lineman, as well. They would re-sign Joseph Asai, the edge rusher, on a 1-year deal worth $7 million. They would re-sign Cam Sample to a 1-year deal. They would sign Oren Burks to a 2-year, $5 million contract. The backup linebacker and rotational piece on the Super Bowl winning Eagles squad. They would re-sign Marco Wilson on a 1-year deal. That's your move to shore up your cornerback position. Okay. And then they re-signed their long snapper, or gave Cal Adamitis a 1-year extension. For the Browns, they picked up Teven Jenkins, the offensive guard, from the Bears. They also picked up, I think I might have covered it, but they picked up Joe Tryon-Shanka, edge rusher, on a 1-year, $4.75 million deal, with $4.19 of that guaranteed. They signed Devin Bush to a 1-year, $3.25 million deal, with $2.97 million guaranteed also. Just rotational. But Devin Bush, honestly, he had the hype around him. I really don't know what that does for him now. I mean, I guess you can try to hope for the best if you're a Browns fan and you still have faith in Devin Bush, but I don't see it at this point. I don't. like the time has passed. For the Steelers, they would sign Scotty Miller on a 1-year deal. They would also re-sign Ben Skoranek on a 2-year deal for some reason. They gave Donald Parham a 1-year deal. They gave Daniel Ekuale, their defensive tackle, a 1-year deal. They re-signed Isaiah Loudermilk on a 1-year deal. They signed Malik Harrison on a 2-year, $10 million deal. There's no way he's being listed as a defensive lineman. That man played linebacker last season. Why are they doing this to him? There's no way. I gotta be tripping. He played linebacker. What the hell? There's no way. Yeah, he played linebacker. Why would they list him as a defensive lineman? Maybe, I mean, he's not the best linebacker. I guess they're trying to make him transition into an edge rusher. But, like, what? That's just unconventional. Okay, though. I mean, they would re-sign James Pierre on a 1-year deal. And they also signed Juan Thornhill. Moving on to the AFC South teams for the Texans, they re-signed Dare Ogunbowale on a 1-year, $2 million deal. They signed Braxton Berrios away from the Jets on a 1-year, $2 million deal. And they also signed Justin Watson away from the Chiefs, the converted wide receiver from tight end. Again, yes, you have Nico Collins, and you are severely missing both Tank Dell and now Stefon Diggs. So honestly, with that developing, now this makes a little more sense, but are they still really enough of an answer and enough of a combined replacement? Because even with those two combined, that's still not enough. You might need to bring someone else in. I'll be honest about that. They signed Trent Brown to a 1-year deal worth up to $3 million. They got Ed Ingram from the Vikings and sent away a 2026 6-rounder. They signed Laken Tomlinson to a 1-year, $4.25 million deal with a maximum of 5. They re-signed Derek Barnett to a 1-year, $5 million deal. They signed the former Seahawk edge rusher Darrell Taylor to a 1-year, $5.25 million deal. They re-signed Mario Edwards to a 2-year, $9.5 million deal. They signed Sheldon Rankins to a 1-year deal with a max value of $7 million. They signed Nick Niemann, the linebacker, to a 2-year deal worth up to $6.5 million. They signed corner Ronald Darby to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. They re-signed return specialist and corner Tremont Smith to a 2-year, $7 million deal. And they also re-signed MJ Stewart for some reason. I don't like that one. Why? Kind of a waste, but okay. Re-signed him to a 1-year, $2.5 million contract with $500,000 guaranteed. So you mean to tell me that this guy can get that kind of guaranteed money in the 6 digits, and you won't even give that to Darrington Evans if you're the Bills? That's crazy. Okay. For the Colts, they signed Khalil Herbert for some reason on a 1-year deal. They re-signed Ashton Dulin, wide receiver, to a 2-year deal worth up to $8.5 million. They re-signed Danny Pinter, center. I guess he would be the lead guy now that they have lost Brian Kelly at this point. They signed Neville Gallimore, defensive lineman, and also Corey Ballantyne, corner, along with their other moves. For the Jaguars, with their other moves, they signed Nick Mullins to a 2-year deal worth $6.5 million, with $3 million of that guaranteed. They also signed the random Madden created player in Hunter Long, tight end, and special teamer, to a 2-year, $5 million deal with a max of $6 million. They also signed Johnny Munt. Why? 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 Both of these players were former Rams tight ends who weren't really that productive with them. Well, no, Johnny Munt was with the Vikings last season, but I do believe he was with the Rams for a time. Unless I am tripping out. Hold on. Yeah. Very brief tenure. I guess maybe for blocking. But I'm looking at a guy who in 5 damn seasons with the Rams, he had just 10 receptions for 93 yards. What the fuck are we doing? Like, that's your play, Jags? That's your play to replace Evan Ingram. And then for Hunter Long even, again, younger guy, sure, but how do you even know that he is going to somewhat match the production that Evan Ingram has for you? With a guy who has only had 8 receptions and 68 yards in his career. Maybe they are just hoping that Brenton Strange takes the next step. They're probably going to need it now more than ever because there is no way that this is the answer. They would sign Chuma Edoga. They would sign Robert Hainsey to a 3-year, $21 million deal with $13 million guaranteed. They signed offensive guard Fred Johnson. Yeah. Moving on to the Titans, they signed Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle to short-term contracts. Okay. They signed Van Jefferson to a 1-year deal with a max value of $2.5 million. They signed Blake Hance. They also signed Kevin Zeitler to a 1-year deal worth $9 million. Maybe that is someone who can help bring along some of the younger offensive lineman talent that they've picked up in the past couple of drafts. Don't really have any qualms with that one. They re-signed career 11 offensive linemen. They signed Lorenzo Carter, outside linebacker. And they also got Draymond Jones away from the Seahawks on a 1-year, $8.5 million deal with a max of 10. Probably trying to make up for Harold Landry III. They signed Sebastian Joseph Day to a 1-year deal worth up to $7.5 million with 5 guaranteed. They signed Xavier Woods and re-signed Morgan Cox prior to signing Johnny Hecker. Makes sense if they were going to lose Ryan Stonehouse. The Broncos, moving on to the AFC West now. They re-signed Matt Peart to a 2-year, $7 million deal. They re-signed DJ Jones to a 3-year deal. They re-signed linebacker Justin Sternett to a 1-year deal worth $2.7 million. They signed Matt Hawk, the punter, and they also re-signed their long snapper Mitchell Fraboni to a 3-year contract. The Chiefs also re-signed Bailey Zappi for some reason, for what it's worth. They signed Elijah Mitchell to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal with $1.35 million guaranteed. They re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster on a 1-year deal. They franchise tagged Trey Smith. They re-signed Charles Omenihu on a 1-year deal worth up to $7 million. They re-signed defensive lineman Mike Pennell and signed Jerry Tillery. Ain't that some shit? One of the most hated defensive lineman out there, and a former Charger now makes his way to a consistent winner in the Chiefs. Couldn't beat him, so I guess he wanted to join him. Matt Araiza signed a tender worth $960,000. And the Chiefs also re-signed Jameis Winston, their long snapper, to 1 year, $1.65 million deal. For the Raiders here, they re-signed Malcolm Kuntz to a 1 year, $12 million deal. They also re-signed Adam Butler to a 3-year contract worth $16.5 million with $11 million in guarantees. I do find it interesting that Adam Butler is getting committed to long-term like that. And at the same time, for Malcolm Kuntz, he has been dealing with injuries, and also, he hasn't shown all that much. But I guess they feel as though there's still some potential there. He's still a relatively young player. He just has to put it all together. If he can get a fully healthy season in, and he can continue to get that kind of influence from Max Crosby, Malcolm Kuntz could be in for a pretty good season this year. Especially without having to worry about other rotational pieces like Caleb Von Chason, for example, getting in his way. Leki Fotu signed with the Raiders, defensive tackle. They signed Landon Roberts to a 1 year, $3.01 million deal. They re-signed Darnay Holmes. They also gave a 2-year extension worth up to $8.45 million to Isaiah Polamalo, their safety. For the Chargers, they re-signed Taylor Heineke. Don't know why, but they re-signed Jalen Reagor as well. They signed Tyler Conklin to a 1 year, $3 million deal with a max value of $4.5 million. I also question that. They re-signed Bradley Bozeman and also signed Andre James. Both of them are centers. They signed Mekhi Becton Sr. to a 2-year, $20 million deal. They signed Deshaun Hand, an edge rusher, to a 1 year, $3.35 million contract. They signed Naquan Jones and re-signed Teair Tart. They re-signed Troy Dye, their linebacker, to a 2-year, $5.5 million deal with a max value of $8 million. They also, for whatever kind of awful reason, decided to sign Benjamin St-Juste, a man who has consistently been crowned and considered to be one of the worst cornerbacks in football over the last 2 years, is now a part of this roster. Now, granted, he probably won't even be a top 3 or 4 piece, but he'll definitely get involvement in some formations. And it is at that point where all offenses will collectively lick their lips and torch his ass, because he is that much of a cone. That shit is not going to change. And then they signed Tony Jefferson back, Johnny Jefferson Sr. They also re-signed J.K. Scott to a 2-year, $6 million deal with $3.15 million fully guaranteed. Their punter. Moving on to transactions on the NFC side, and starting out with the Cowboys in the NFC East. They actually signed former Ohio State wide receiver and Eagles wide receiver Paris Campbell to 1 year. Giants wide receiver Paris Campbell to a 1-year deal. They signed Robert Jones, offensive guard, to a 1-year deal worth up to $4.75 million. They actually re-signed Dante Fowler Jr. after letting him go last offseason. He had a great year with the Commanders last season, but to give him another 1-year contract, that's just a temporary fix. You're not getting the job done with that. To make matters even worse, they get Peyton Turner from the Saints, and obviously he didn't accomplish much of anything with them. So naturally, the Saints viewed him as a lost cause and damaged goods at this point. They don't need him anymore. They are just taking the bait on him, I guess. I don't expect him to produce with this team at all. They signed Solomon Thomas to a 2-year contract. They re-signed C.J. Goodwin to a one-year deal, their cornerback. They re-signed their safety Marquise Bell to a 3-year deal worth up to $12 million. They re-signed both their long snapper and punter and Brian Enger to free agent deals as well. For the Giants, along with their moves, they also re-signed return specialist Amir Smith-Marset to a deal. They re-signed Chris Manhertz, old-ass tight end. And that's saying something if you're up there with Mercedes Lewis at this point, right? Stone Forsythe, tackle, signed with them. They signed offensive tackle James Hudson to a 2-year, $12 million deal with a max of $16. They re-signed Greg Van Roten for some reason also. They signed Chauncey Golston to a 3-year, $19 million deal, edge rusher. They signed Jeremiah Ledbetter to a 1-year, $1.775 million deal with a max value of at least 2 with incentives. They signed Roy Robertson Harris away from the Seahawks to a 2-year, $9 million deal with a max of 10. Good luck with that. He didn't do anything with the Seahawks. They need depth pieces, but the Giants need a lot more than just a depth piece at this point. You gotta try to pair somebody alongside Dexter Lawrence II at this point. But that's just me. They signed Chris Board away from the Ravens to a 2-year deal worth up to $6 million, a linebacker. They signed safety Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles away from the 49ers. They re-signed Jamie Gillen, their punter, to a 3-year contract worth up to $10 million. And they re-signed their long snapper in Casey Kreiter. For the Eagles, along with their other moves that I mentioned, they signed both Harrison Bryant and Colin Granson as backup tight ends to 1-year contracts. They also acquired Josh Uche on a 1-year, $1.25 million deal, and an additional $500,000 could be awarded with incentives. They also signed Adoree Jackson, corner, to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. In losing Avonte Maddox, getting someone like Jackson back is honestly not terrible, but you were still suffering nonetheless. I guess it's not too bad as like a third or fourth option there. And maybe some, exotic formations he'd be included in. They re-signed their long snapper Charlie Hewitt to a 1-year deal, and they re-signed their return specialist Avery Williams to a 1-year deal. For the Commanders, they re-signed both Marcus Mariota and Jeremy McNichols to 1-year deals. They re-signed both Noah Brown and KJ Osborne as well. They re-signed John Bates, their tight end, to a 3-year, $21 million deal with $11.52 million fully guaranteed and a max of $25.5 million. They re-signed Trent Scott, their offensive tackle. They signed Nate Herbig and re-signed Michael Dater. They re-signed Cleveland Farrell. They signed Jacob Martin to a 1-year deal worth up to $3 million and Deatrice Wise Jr. to a 1-year deal worth up to $5 million away from the Patriots. They signed Eddie Goldman to a 1-year, $1.255 million deal with just $315K guaranteed. They signed defensive tackle Jalen Holmes. They signed Sheldon Day on a 1-year contract as well. They re-signed Nick Bellore. He listed as a linebacker. He is not a linebacker. Don't fall for that. They signed Jonathan Jones, corner. They signed safety Will Harris to a 2-year, $8 million contract with a max of 10. They re-signed Zay Gonzalez and re-signed Tress Way as well. Moving on to the NFC North and starting out with the Bears, they re-signed Travis Homer along with their other moves. They also picked up Durham Smythe on a 1-year deal and signed Nick McLeod for some reason. They re-signed Amen Ogbongbemiga to a 2-year, $5 million deal, and they re-signed their long snapper in Scott Daly. to the Lions, they signed Kyle Allen for some reason. They re-signed Tim Patrick. They signed Kenny Yeboah, tight end. They re-signed offensive lineman Dan Skipper and edge rusher Al-Quadin Muhammad and edge rusher Pat O'Connor. They re-signed Marcus Davenport as well. One of their big acquisitions last offseason, didn't necessarily pan out in the early portions, but their entire defense ended up getting hurt, so it was what it was. They get him back on a one-year deal worth up to $4.75 million. They signed defensive tackle Roy Lopez to a one-year $4.65 million deal. They signed Leve Onwuzurike, re-signed him to a one-year $5.5 million deal. They signed Grant Stewart on a free agent deal. They re-signed cornerback Khalil Dorsey as a special teamer. They signed broadcasting as well. I already covered that, though. Moving on to additional moves for the Packers. Outside of their other moves, only one to note here is that they've re-signed their linebacker Isaiah McDuffie on a free agent deal. Moving on to the Vikings, they signed offensive tackle Justin Skull. They signed Eric Wilson back. They used to have him a few years ago. So, I guess for familiarity's sake, you can afford to bring him back, I suppose. They signed Tavier Thomas as a depth piece. They signed Theo Jackson to a 2-year, $12.615 million extension. And they re-signed punter Ryan Wright on a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. Moving on to the Falcons, they re-signed Kadero Hodge on a 2-year, $6 million contract. They re-signed Storm Norton, their offensive tackle. They re-signed Kentavious Street. They signed defensive lineman Morgan Fox to a 2-year, $8.5 million deal worth a little more with incentives. They re-signed Mike Hughes to a 3-year, $18 million deal with $9.64 million guaranteed. And they signed Liam McCullough to a 4-year extension as a long snapper. You don't hear too much craziness surrounding long snapper contracts, but I guess they want to keep him around for the long term. Fair enough. Moving on to the Panthers. They re-signed David Moore on a 1-year deal and re-signed Tommy Tremble to a 2-year deal worth up to $16 million with $8 million guaranteed. They re-signed Brady Christensen, their offensive guard, to a 1-year, $2.787 million deal. They re-signed Austin Corbett as well. They signed Patrick Jones II to a 2-year deal worth up to $20 million. They got I did mention that. They signed Bobby Brown III to a 3-year, $21 million deal with a max value of $27 million. They signed linebacker Christian Roseboom. They signed Michael Jackson Sr. on a free agent deal, bringing him back. And they re-signed Nick Scott, their safety, while also signing a 1-year contract with Sam Martin worth up to $3 million, the punter. He is pretty much near 40 right now. He might actually be 40. He's probably not going to play for too much longer, so keeping that contract short term is honestly fine with me, and in a win-win situation, in an optimal situation, he won't be having to punt the ball for you as much. Unless the Panthers just continue to be as bad as they have been. Moving on to the Saints, they re-signed return specialist Dante Pettis. They signed Jack Stoll. They signed Dylan Robbins, offensive guard. They re-signed Chase Young on a 3-year, $51 million deal with a max value of $57 million, which I think is honestly good. He's not necessarily blowing the competition away with his production like he was slated to do as a top pick in the 2020 draft, but he has been, when healthy, solid. And he had a pretty respectable season last year. So you can't deny that he's got the talent and enough production to at least stay a consistent piece on any given team that needs his services. The Saints just happen to need him now. They've re-signed, I think I did cover that, actually. They signed Isaac Yiadom to a 3-year, $9 million deal with a max value of $10.5 million, with just $4.86 million guaranteed. And moving on to the Bucs, they re-signed Kyle Trask on a 1-year, $2.78 million deal. I think I covered it, but didn't give out the contract details. They signed Charlie Heck, offensive tackle. They've re-signed Ben Bredesen to a 3-year, $22 million deal, their offensive guard. They re-signed defensive lineman Greg Gaines. They also re-signed Bryce Hall and signed Kendall Vildor, while signing former Broncos punter Riley Dixon to a 2-year, $6 million deal. And then moving on to additional transactions or so from the NFC West. For the Cardinals, they signed wide receiver Simi Fehoko to a 1-year contract and re-signed Zay Jones to a 1-year deal as well. They re-signed Kelvin Beachum, their offensive tackle, to a 1-year deal as well. They re-signed our offensive guard Evan Brown to a 2-year deal worth $11.5 million. And they also gave Akeem Davis-Gaither, the former Bengals linebacker, a 2-year, $11 million contract, while also bringing in Michael Walker on a 1-year deal worth $1.79 million with $500K guaranteed, while re-signing their long snapper Aaron Brewer to a 1-year deal. For the Rams, they re-signed Ronnie Rivers and also signed Coleman Shelton to a 2-year, $12 million contract with $9 million guaranteed. They signed Laryl Murchison, defensive tackle, and they also signed away Puna Ford as a defensive lineman. His contract is 3 years and worth up to $29.6 million. That's definitely a good steal for them, but, doesn't do anything as it pertains to the Seahawks. I mean, they got their guy. You know what I'm saying? For the 49ers. They re-signed Patrick Taylor Jr. on a 1-year deal. They signed Luke Farrell to a 3-year deal worth up to $20.25 million with $11 million guaranteed. They signed Ben Barch. They re-signed their defensive lineman Kevin Gibbons. They signed linebacker Luke Gifford to a 1-year deal. They signed away Trey Brown from the Seahawks to a 1-year, $1.7 million contract worth $500K guaranteed. They signed Seren Neal to a 2-year deal, another cornerback. And they also signed Richie Grant to a 1-year, $1.5 million deal with $200K guaranteed. I think I covered that one. They also signed long snapper John Weeks. I mean, hey, everybody in the NFC West is literally trying to copycat. Why does everybody want to steal the Seahawks players for themselves? That's really how this goes. I thought that Trey Brown was going to be a given to stay, especially over Josh Jobe, who the Seahawks actually retained. And I think they allude to that in this section. They don't. But that I kind of find that interesting. For the Seahawks, though, I did see this days earlier. They signed backup wide receiver River Craycraft to a deal. They got him. As a depth piece, sure. I don't really expect much in terms of production from him, but you never really know. They also signed away Eric Saubert and gave him a deal. I don't necessarily know about it. I mean, I guess as a blocking tight end, okay. But if you're expecting him to produce anything in the receiving game, he's not going to. So I can't really get my hopes up about that one. They signed offensive tackle Josh Jones to a one-year deal worth up to $4.75 million. And they also signed a death piece in Shamar Jean-Charles, corner. And that is it for at least all of the moves from 32 teams that I'm covering in this one. Again, it's, the major flurry is probably out of the way. There are still things going down, as I mentioned in the video in the first portion. So, chances are I'm probably going to have to do another sort of video like this related to free agency prior to the NFL draft, just to get in one last piece of coverage about this. And ultimately, similar thing during the draft could happen. You could have teams trade away different pieces then. So, this stuff is still going to be developing. The road does not end here for it. But to add in a trio of additional pieces of information here. So, earlier in the week, the NFL and Under Armour actually reached a new agreement to where Under Armour will become the official footwear and glove sponsor of the NFL. Obviously, they still have the connection with Nike in terms of most of the apparel, but as a footwear and glove partner, Under Armour's got it. They're going to have a long-term partnership, and there are multiple layers to it as well. Not only are they going to be having their brand placed on footwear and, I guess, glove wear for that matter, they will also be doing their best to promote both the NFL and themselves. They're talking about here with some of the components having access to NFL media platforms, content creators, and distribution channels to further collaborate on content and initiatives for on-field and in-game exposure. So, generally speaking, like you see how ad placement goes down on some YouTube videos from time to time, and they'll also have, I guess, sponsored events and things like that as well. I know EA, for example, with a lot of the Madden creators that you see around, they'll have some specified days and things for them. 2K's done the same thing. I guess Under Armour's a larger sort of brand around the world, so they can obviously go bigger and better with some of the people that they bring in to give way to that exposure. They also are going to have the support of the NFL and their grassroots initiatives, as NFL with the NFL play, with the flag football scene. They're all about bringing up the next generation of ball players and allowing for young individuals, children, teens, to get involved in football in some way. They've been promoting that for years, and with Under Armour now in the fray, they can incorporate an element of that into the Under Armour landscape. All for them to, as they have it here, promote youth sports and development. Again, when you're Under Armour and, I don't know, like Under Armour, I'm not going to act like it's not one of the biggest brands in the world when it comes to sportswear and things like that. But what I will say is that even in this landscape, you still have your Nikes, your Adidas, your Jordans, your things like that taking over. So anytime you find yourself in a spot where you can get a piece of the pie, Under Armour is doing what they can, to be honest. They already have their long-standing deal with Nike for the apparel, and that will probably, whenever they convene about it in the next few years, they'll probably re-sign it and extend it. So you're not going to completely oust Nike out of the mainframe. And there are some players who have connections to other brands that you just cannot force any sort of your own influence on. But at the very least, Under Armour does have some promise. I mean, they had quotes from two of their sponsored athletes in the league right now. One of them is Kyle Hamilton, and one of them is Justin Jefferson. So if those are the guys who could be the face of this new marketing campaign for Under Armour as it pertains to the NFL, they're honestly going to be quite fine. You'll attract a good audience of people. NFL brings in so much money per year, so you don't have to worry about that at all. You just need to make sure that you do enough to carve out your own distinct audience here and get enough people at an optimal time to consume your brand in some way. That's really what it comes down to. But they have, at least for the next few years, secured themselves a seat at the table. That's really all you can ask for when you're dealing with these kinds of deals with any of the big four sports. You just want to have your shot. They took it. Now we will have to see if they can compound on it completely. Another piece of news, it's just honestly comical to me. I don't even know if many people remember the movie last year that Hallmark had about the fucking Christmas themed shit with the Chiefs and everything like that. I didn't fucking watch this shit, and even when I heard about it, I'm like, dude, I just didn't see the point of it. And I guess, I don't know, I guess some people were, like, honestly, no one in my circle gave a damn about it. But clearly there was an audience for it somewhere, because not only did Hallmark decide to bring back another fucking, what the fuck? Yeah, another Christmas movie about with the title Holiday Touchdown. Not only did they bring this back, but now, for the Buffalo fans out there, they're making this Bills themed Holiday Touchdown, a Bills love story. Like, you just can't make it. That's just fucking rigged. You can't make that shit up. I don't know how many people are going to really tune into that one. I guess it's a win for Buffalo. It's gonna be so unfortunate. They're gonna force so many Bills players in there. Like, I mean, I guess Josh Allen is not necessarily a person that gets all crazy about these things, but I doubt he's really willing to waste his time acting in this fucking horseshit. So you can group in a pool of players along with him that don't want to spend their time doing that, to be completely honest with you. And it's just going to be so weird too, because you're going to have this release on Christmas. Obviously, they are not going to have during the regular season time to make that happen. So you're going to start up the filming process. You announced this earlier, literally yesterday. So you're going to start the filming process probably over the summer. How odd is that? It's just going to be so fucking chopped, man. Like, I'm not even going to watch the film, and I can already tell you, they're going to have to, I guess it's no different with any sort of fucking production, but you're going to have to kind of create a lot of fucking CGI type shit. And you're going to have to find a way to generate fake snow as well, unless you go to a location that is actually snowing around this time, which isn't necessarily feasible. Like, even though you might be able to make that happen over the summer, these players still have schedules that they have to abide to. And I swear, I hope they do not put Sean McDermott in this shit either. Like, the last thing that man is worried about is this shit. But I suppose with the way that their social media team is, people who do tune into it will certainly have a field day with it. I can guarantee you that at the very least. That's really all I can say for now. Also, yesterday, they, for whatever reason, amongst the litany of other celebrations that they are banning, they are enforcing a penalty on one of CeeDee Lamb's celebrations in which he wipes his nose. They're banning that and turning that into a penalty. That's soft as shit. I mean, yes, with all the gun shit left and right. Oh man, I cannot tell you how many times across multiple sports over just the past month alone I've seen young ass niggas and even women too on the women's side throwing up fucking gunshots and alluding to fucking shooting guns consistently. Yes, there's already the stuff about that, but honestly, because the context of the celebration is that CeeDee Lamb always does it after he picks up a first down, or I guess whenever he makes a sort of dagger-style play. It's like, honestly, yes, it could allude to something else, but at its root, it's just something so simple and so relatively insignificant. And the NFL wants to invest all their time and focus into banning it. I just don't see the point of it. Like, literally, they are just... It seems as though with some of the moves that they make on a year-to-year basis, they are trying to make themselves into the no-fun league. They're trying their hardest to live up to that moniker. And it's just like, that's just kind of lame. Like, bro, let the players do what they... Not necessarily do what they want, but, man, as long as the celebration isn't something completely, I guess, degenerate, because that's when, I guess, you have all the trouble, especially in today's age. Like, you know, in the NBA, for example, they outlawed the fucking big balls celebration. Or at least they've enforced the fine on that. And, I mean, even that is relatively harmless, but you can see why they do that. To have a man wipe their nose and get fined for a 15-yard penalty, or get docked for a 15-yard penalty, it's like, that's just laughably bad. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.